Please welcome the presenter of our first Spotlight session, Chief Scientist for the Nature Conservancy and Horn Distinguished Professor at Texas Tech University, Katharine Hayhoe.
Thank you so much. I think that's the first time I've been introduced by the voice of God. It is a pleasure to be with you today. There are such amazing sessions on such a variety of important topics and voices. And I love that I got to listen into some of the earlier sessions. And I wanted to provide a broad overview now of how this all comes together. So let's just check to make sure this is working. Yes, it is. All right. So how do we take all of these issues and concerns and how do we turn them into motivation for action? This is a question that I, as a climate scientist, have asked myself for years, because we have known for over 150 years that digging up and burning fossil fuels produces heat-trapping gases that are building up in the atmosphere, wrapping an extra blanket around the planet. So if facts alone were enough to spur climate action, we would have seen action in the 1800s. But we didn't. Why is that? It isn't a lack of scientific understanding. We know, as far back as we can go in the history of our planet, that we have never seen this much carbon going into the atmosphere this quickly. We know that we're conducting an unprecedented experiment with our home. We know, and this summer we really know, that climate change is loading the weather dice against us. As you know, I often refer to this issue not as global warming, but as global weirding. Because wherever we live, we see that heat waves are getting stronger. Wildfires are burning more area. Hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons are spinning up much quicker and dumping a lot more rain on us. And when you look around the world, these are results from the Yale Program on Climate Communications' last global survey, people are worried, and they should be. Because wherever people live today, you either yourself or you know somebody who is being impacted by a changing climate. Gray just means they didn't survey that country. It doesn't mean they're not worried. So for 2 years now, when I talk to medical professionals, college students, faith groups, business people, architects, I ask them, how do you feel about climate change in just one word? And I just pulled this one up. Who do you think these people are? Are they climate activists? No. Are they scientists? No. Are they environmentalists or NGOs? No. This was a group of botanical artists. Whoever I talk to, I get the same results. Worried, scared, anxious, concerned, angry, frustrated. And I say you should be. You should be. If you know what's happening and you know what's being done about it, this is how we feel. So what can we do about it? How do we move people from already being worried, because believe me, most people are already worried, to acting? And what really struck me last year was one of the Yale Program on Climate Communications surveys found that only 8% of people are activated. So how do we activate people? Often we think that me and everybody I know is worried, but all those people who never talk about it, they're not worried. Well, you know what? They're coping with their worry by not talking about it. Because why would you want to talk about something that's incredibly depressing that you don't know what to do about? I'm not the type of personality that likes to talk about those things, and most people aren't either. So when climate changes and we get worried, often here is what we do. And when I say we, I don't just mean us as humans, I mean often the media as well. We share more scary info. And believe you me, we have a lot of scary info to share. It's 100% true, right? So then, unfortunately, we see people rejecting it even more. And even this summer, I heard so many people saying, if this isn't enough, what is? And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but that's not the barrier. The barrier is we don't know what to do about it. And so if you go and you look at how our human brain functions, and Tali Sherrod is a neuroscientist. She published a really interesting book called The Influential Mind that has nothing to do with climate change on the surface, but below I think it has everything to do with it. She says fear And again, she's not talking about climate change. She's talking about the human brain. Fear and anxiety cause us to withdraw, to freeze, to give up rather than take action. But when you look at the data, it turns out that most of us are worried, only a tiny group are activated, and there's a small group who claim not to be worried, but I think in some ways climate denial is actually a defense mechanism against worry. So the question is not how to move people from the yellow to the blue, the question is how to move the blue to the green. And that's a very different question. So if you're coping with people who are already worried, but they don't know what to do, and as a group of very worried people asked me last year in Iowa, they said, how do we talk about the polar bears to make people activated? And my answer is really, frankly, unless you're a polar bear, I don't see how you do it. And I love polar bears as much as the next person. I'm Canadian. So I said, you don't. If I'm in Texas, where I live, I talk to Jack about cotton and about how he hasn't had a decent crop since 2005 because it's been so hot and so dry. When I'm with my colleague Joellen in Arizona, we talk about how she has to wake her kids up before dawn in the summer because that's the only time they can play outside. Otherwise, it's too hot. We talk about what happens to our homes when it floods, like here in New York City. We talk about the nature we love. People love nature, and it's being impacted too. And the biodiversity crisis is real, and climate change is making it worse. We talk about the things we love doing, a beach vacation, good wine, or skiing. We connect it to our heart. We talk about climate change because of who we are. And this is what happens when you have a Mac and this is a PC. Things move a little bit. So where do I start conversations? I definitely start them with being a scientist because a lot of people love science and people are curious about science. So I do talk about science with people. But I also talk about what's happening in the place I'm from, and I talk about what's happening in the place I live. I talk about the fact that I enjoy doing things outdoors. I'm a mother, I'm a person of faith. And I lean into all of these as a scientist, as a person of faith, and as a mother. This is our Science Moms organization, scientists who are mothers and dads too, and connect with people from the heart, showing them how they're the perfect person to care, who they already are. And often people say, well, could you talk to so-and-so? And I'm like, well, but I'm not that type of person. So just to give you an extreme example, you know, the hook and bullet crowd, as they call it, people who hunt and fish. Don't they want a healthy environment? Yes, they do. I don't hunt, so I'm not the perfect person to have that conversation. But believe you me, there are people concerned about climate change who do hunt, and they're the perfect person to have that conversation. So who are you? Make a list. What do you love? What are you passionate about? What are you really into? What's your expertise? Where do you live? What's your history? How could you connect with people? I've heard stories of people connecting with people, and I've connected with people myself over both being foodies or both loving to cook. I've connected over knitting. If we begin with something we have in common, we show people how to care about climate change. You don't have to be a scientist, an environmentalist, or an activist. You only have to be one thing, and that is a human being living on planet Earth who calls it home. Because where does the oxygen we breathe come from? Every other breath comes from tiny phytoplankton in the ocean. Where does the water we drink come from? It's filtered through nature. All the materials we use, it comes from this planet. People need to know how climate change is affecting us, but they also need to know not just the heart, but the hands. They need to connect why they care to what they can do about it to make a difference. Because if we think that what we do can make a difference, which social scientists call efficacy, if we have a sense of efficacy, then we're willing to try. And today, people's psychological distance from climate change is plummeting. We understand it's here and now, but our lack of efficacy is growing. We don't feel there's anything we can do to prevent the wildfires or the smoke or the floods or the heat waves. And so this is what we have to address at the same time. And there's a solid scientific basis for addressing this. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 1.5-degree report literally concluded every action matters. Every bit of warming matters. This is the science. So there is a physical scientific basis for efficacy that what we do actually matters. And when we show people that, yes, countries really are acting, that, yes, corporations are actually acting too, that, yes, communities are acting, churches, army bases, schools. Young people are definitely acting. We know that. But it's not on them. It's on all of us. Our own lives are changing. The lives of people around the world are changing. Change is possible. Change is not a giant boulder sitting at the bottom of an impossibly steep cliff with only a few people. Let's see. Whoops. I think we're missing it. Oh, there we go. I pushed the button too quickly. There we go. Climate action is not a giant boulder with only one or two people's hands on it. People often think, well, it's, Al Gore, Greta Thunberg, maybe Sir David Attenborough. Climate action already has millions of people's hands on it. And if we add our hand, and if we encourage others to add theirs, it will go faster. So over this last year, the number one question I've been asked by almost everybody I speak to is, what do I do? What can I do? So at the top of my social media, I just pin what you can do. And you'll notice this all has something in common. What does this all have in common? What it has in common is what Bill McKibben says. The most important thing an individual can do is not be such an individual. When we engage with others through having conversations, because how do people work together without a conversation? It's not sufficient, but it's necessary. Through joining a group and amplifying our voice, speaking with our money, speaking at work and school, speaking to hold politicians accountable in voting, reducing our personal footprint, but do not ever stop there. Amplify it and catalyze change, make it contagious through talking about it. And where do we start all these conversations? We start it with our hearts. What we love, who we love, where we love, what we're passionate about. And when we do that, that is how we catalyze cultural change. It's the fertile field in which talk begins. Without it, we can't fix a problem. So when we begin this way, we're knocking over the first domino in a long chain of dominoes towards a better future. So what does this look like in practical terms when climate changes and we get worried? Instead of sharing more information about the polar bears and the ice sheets, unless you're a polar bear living on an ice sheet, in which case definitely do, we share how it affects us and what real positive solutions look like. And this enables people to connect directly from the heart and to feel like, okay, there's something I can actually do about it, and that's when action results. And that's the way our brains are programmed. The human brain is built to associate forward action with a reward, not avoiding harm. And again, I promise you, this was not written for climate change. It was just written for the human brain. So reframe what you say so the information you provide induces hope, not dread. And to that, I would add love. So what are we waiting for? We can do this. We know how to do this. We have the solutions. And by starting with shared values, that is the first step to bringing everyone along with us, because doesn't everybody want a better world? Thank you.